All right. I don't know why I'm so scared. It's fine. It's a movie. Nothing's gonna happen. I can do it. Candyman. Candyman. Okay, that's two. Candyman. 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 Whoa, that was weird. I should probably check with Pico or something, but at least Candyman didn't get me. I mean, nothing happened. Hi, I'm Dave, founder of Halloween Year Round, and since I was fortunate enough to survive that vicious plastic hook attack, I'm here to talk to you guys about the new Candyman movie, co-written and produced by Jordan Peele, co-written and then directed by Nia DaCosta. This was the movie that we were supposed to get in June of 2020, a whole 14 months ago, but we all know what happened. So it's finally out. I know there's been a lot of buzz, no pun intended, and a lot of anticipation about this one. And I went into it with those very high expectations. So there were things I really liked about it. There were some things I really didn't like about it. And while I really did enjoy seeing it, and I'm glad I did, I don't know that it quite lives up to the hype. I don't know that... I just rewatched the original the night before I saw this one, and I'm still kind of processing how I feel about both. I'm actually doing a comparison of that tomorrow on the website, so check that out. But let's talk about the new one. So, starring Yahya Abdul-Mateen, who of course you'll recognize from HBO's Watchmen and Aquaman, as well as he was Adelaide's dad in the opening scene of Us. He's our main character, Anthony. He's this artist whose girlfriend is like an art dealer, and that kind of gets him the in. And he hears the story of Candyman and, wants to explore that in his art because, well, it's an interesting story. So what this one does very well is I love the brutality of the kills. In the original, a lot of them were, Helen was blacking out during them, but here you see them and they're pretty gruesome. They're pretty, brutal and intense, and for sadistic horror fans like myself, they're not a disappointment. They're actually one of the highlights. The only thing I felt was a little weird. So Candyman only appears, in like a reflection, but he's not really visible otherwise, and it gets a little close to like the Invisible Man, which I felt worked for that movie given its premise. I don't know how it works for this one, but like I said, it really brutal kills and great kind of like grotesque body horror practical makeup gore, which I get weird. I get really weird and skeeved out at like stuff with like skin. So there were plenty of times where I'm like, oh, I don't like that. But as far as protagonists go, I really do like Anthony. I like that, as a fellow content creator who's, trying to be up and coming, I really related to his just devotion to, I've stumbled onto something and I'm gonna chase this down. So here's where I'm gonna get into minor spoilers, very minor. I had major issues with the third act. I'm not gonna spoil it outright, but I'm gonna get into. So we learn here that there is more than one Candyman. That the Tony Todd character of Daniel Robital was the original, but that Candyman is sort of a symbolic figure of anyone and any person of color who was brutalized and unjustly murdered, and is sort of like a symbol of that vengeance. So you have a new Candyman in the form of this new guy Sherman, who literally gives out candy to children, and he was the victim of police brutality and ultimately murder when they killed him. So from a symbolic perspective, I really, really like and respect what Jordan Peele and Nia DaCosta are saying here. They're turning Candyman, and they're sort of using that idea, that symbol, to reconcile with centuries of brutality, centuries of injustice and oppression, and it's a really, really interesting and ultimately tragic idea that Candyman would even need to exist at all, but that he exists only because there is this horrible racism that is perpetuated all these years. So from a strictly metaphorical, symbolic perspective, I think the movie, it knows what it's trying to say, and I think it says that very, very effectively. The only area that I feel it starts to falter a little bit is in its actual storyline. So I get that Candyman is an idea, and there's more than one of them, but it doesn't really mesh with what was established in the original, where you only had one, and this new Candyman who was murdered in the 1970s also randomly happened to have a hook for a hand and also randomly gave out candy. I almost feel like, and I'm gonna I'm gonna get hate for saying this. First of all, there is no Candyman but Tony Todd, and I don't want to give anything away in that regard, but I think this movie almost would have worked better had it been a true reboot, and had they changed Candyman to this new character who gave candy to children, and they were allegedly razor blades, but it wasn't really him, and then he was brutally murdered by the police. And I think that makes this movie more relevant, which it's even more relevant now being released after 2020, after the tragic events that happened in June of 2020 with George Floyd. And it's all the more, kind of depressing and sobering that this movie was completed long before that happened. So this movie was trying to say that before that event even took place. Much like Spiral, it was a movie that was made pre-2020, but became more tragically relevant after 2020. So all that said, I think it would have worked just fine had you done it as a true reboot, and it's Candyman for a new age. Because the way that it stands now, it almost feels like the movie, it wants to have its cake and eat it too. It wants to kind of be a reboot, and it's like, oh, here's the new Candyman, this guy Sherman, who was brutalized by the police in 1977, but we don't want to alienate the diehard fans, so it's also going to be a sequel where Tony Todd's Candyman still exists in this world. But when you do that, you get a very weird, very contrived coincidence that there was a guy in the 1890s who was killed with bees and honey, and they called him Candyman. And then there was a guy in the 1970s who also gave out candy, and they killed him, and he also liked to dress in long brown coats too. It feels like it's trying to do both at once, and I think as much as I love the original, and as much as I enjoyed that this connects to the original, I love that, Helen from, Virginia Madsen's character from the 1992 film, she's kind of become her own urban legend here, and I think that's such a cool idea, especially when you incorporate the whole theme of urban legends. But, what I'm trying to say is I'd be willing to lose the connection to the original and go with this new Candyman if it's a true reboot. I just feel like in trying to do both, it's biting off more than it can chew. So it's a movie that has very interesting ideas that I think need to be discussed and talked about, but it's a movie that I think its story and its logic in the narrative suffers a little bit for it. And don't get me started on that third act. If you've seen it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It takes a very hard turn into, I don't even know what to call it, where there is something of a twist, and it's like you didn't really see it coming because, there was nothing really to set it up, but the twist takes you into new territory that you're like, I was not expecting this movie to go here, and it seems a bit strange that that's where you would take it. Like, I get it, and it's an interesting idea, but it feels like the third act followed a different movie than this one did. And maybe had this been the true reboot and had it not been necessary to connect it to the original, maybe that third act would have played out better. Maybe it would have flowed better with what came in, like the hour or so before it. So it's well acted. It is very well directed. Stylistically, it's brilliant. There's Nia DaCosta is she definitely knows how to create a sense of dread and atmosphere, because when people are saying Candyman in the mirror 5 times, in the original, I never quite got the sense of dread that it was like, oh my god, don't say it. And that, of course, is due to the brutal nature of when he does show up. You're like, oh my god, like, this takes Candyman and makes him the terrifying villain that, we always knew he could be, that he always had the potential to be. It's just in the original, he actually doesn't get a whole lot of screen time. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, I was a little disappointed that we don't really hear that iconic Philip Glass score until the end credits. I feel like that needed to pop up earlier in the movie. Nothing against it, its current score. I feel like we needed that. It is so, that theme is so poetic and beautiful and tragic, just all in one, and it is Candyman. So, like I said, I'm glad I saw it. If you are looking for just a great horror movie that, is smart and has something to say, I think you'll enjoy it. If you're a fan of the original and you want it to be connected to the original, you'll probably enjoy it. But if you're looking for it to be a soft reboot that connects to the original where everything makes sense, you might be a tiny bit disappointed. So I think that's it. I think those are all my thoughts on Candyman. I will definitely, I'm very excited. I think I heard Nia DaCosta is doing a Marvel movie next. I think I read that somewhere. I'd be very, like I said, it only, the narrative bothered me a little bit, but the way the movie, it's very, very well made. I cannot stress that enough. It is very well, it's very well polished, and it is very, there's a lot of tension in it that I think was not necessarily there in the original. So check it out if you feel so inclined. If you're a true horror fan, you can check out my website, HalloweenYearRound.com. Follow it on social media, Facebook and Twitter. I will be doing an article this weekend doing a straight-up comparison, Candyman 1992 versus 2021. So look for that. I will also be going to Creature Feature Weekend this Sunday in Gettysburg. Look for a video on that early next week. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe. If you don't, Candyman will show up in your mirror whether you said his name 5 times or not. And as always, until I see you again, stay scared, and every day is Halloween.
That felt really good.
What, attacking me?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna attack more people with this hook.
Okay.
That was fun. Yeah.
Well, now I have something else to worry about. Hey. You know it's made of plastic, right?
Yeah, I gotta get a real one.